Right now?
Yeah. Do you have it up?
Yep.
Okay.
Llama Llama Red Pajama. Ludacris is here.
Yeah,
Fate
man.
of the Furious in theater tomorrow.
Hey, llama llama, red pajama. Reads a story with who? With his mama. Hey, mama kisses.
Definitely great for our demo. So he did the music for this.
I think they probably had some sort of like mix ready, and he just freestyled it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, he's like smiling, glinty-eyed. Like you can tell his kids make him read this to them all the time. I just love it. No, like I am deep into this with my son right now. We read the same thing, I mean, over and over. He does like more, the sign for more, and we just constantly, as soon as it's done, more. I played that, and he listened and then went and got Llama Llama Jingle Bells out of his bookcase and brought it to me.
He realized that at least. Yeah.
Not only is he adorable, but he is brilliant.
But he's a genius.
Yes.
Baby genius. And then he tried to eat a pencil.
Can't win them all.
Can't
win them all.
He's just like a lot of kids. He likes yellow foods.
Well, welcome back to Crosswalk.com's Inside the Editor's Room podcast, where we give you a look at how our editors discuss the trends and issues of the day from a Christian perspective. And just now we were taking a minute to enjoy the stylings of rapper Ludacris there as he sings about the children's book Llama Llama Red Pajama. And like most parents, he seems to have read it many times. I'm Steve McGarvey. I'm the editor-in-chief here for Crosswalk.com and the editorial director for Salem Web Network. This week, we're talking about blogger Jen Hatmaker's Good Friday Return from Solitude and Lisa Jo Baker's new book, Never Unfriended. But first, let's go around the room and introduce ourselves.
I'm Rachel Dawson. I'm the design editor.
I'm Kelly Givens. I'm the editor of I Believe, and I'm also known as Nellie Kelly when I'm in my rap persona.
Not K-John anymore?
Not K-John.
And I'm Sean McAvoy, the managing editor at Crosswalk.com. And I didn't know who that was or what that was.
Probably for the best.
Yeah. Well, you guys, back around Good Friday, Jen Hatmaker, and I'll give a little bit of full disclosure on this. Jen and I were at the same university at the same time. She was a student a few years after me, she and Brandon both, when I was working in the admissions office. So I have always followed her career and even was talked to her at one time about potentially blogging for Crosswalk. So last summer, as most people who followed Jen know, she gave an interview with Jonathan Merritt in which she came out in favor of gay marriage. And there have been some posts since then in which she has clarified her stance and how she and her husband kind of spent a year studying the issue and looking at things. And this has gained her some new fans and gained her some and lost her some fans in the Christian space as well. And on Good Friday, she wrote a post explaining how this Good Friday has been difficult for her in ways that past ones were not, and explaining kind of some of her absence from a term she used was the Christian machine and the blogosphere itself. And where she's at now. This prompted a lot of different discussions that went in a lot of different directions about platforms for writers, especially Christian women writers, about what is this Christian machine in publishing, and what responsibilities do you have to certain audiences, and really it plays into things we've talked about as a group for years of what does the cycle of a young up and coming writer and blogger look like, and where does that go? What thoughts did we have about that?
Initially, I felt like I could empathize with Jen Hatmaker a little bit. I kind of see both sides of it. The controversy erupted over, what did she mean by authenticity and brand, and it was kind of, I felt like her post was a little bit on the vague side. And there's a sense in which you could say, well, yeah, I can understand the hurt that she feels, where she, all of a sudden she was beloved by so many people, and then she heard from people who were not happy at all. And as is the custom on social media, a mob formed and kind of railed at her, and it sounds like she took it really hard, like anyone would. Like, this happens to us sometimes and where we are. And so I'm sympathetic to that. But at the other side of that, I feel like you have to understand that when you step up to a platform and say, this is what I think, and this is what you should think, and this is what I believe, you're going to open yourself up to people who don't agree with that. And people are complex, and people have different,
We deal with that all the time.
Yeah,
We see
it's like people think you're one thing because they resonate with something that you said, and they start to follow you, and then they hear about this other thing that they might disagree with, and then it's like, because the internet allows those people to gather on one particular issue, it sounds like you're being, yelled at. And
you use the term mob when you said something in another discussion that, these people individually aren't a mob. They're individuals. And it just feels like that to the person being commented upon.
Sure. And I think a lot of the people, I've said before, I think a lot of the individuals who are like expressing their distaste for what she said don't consider themselves a mob. They're just like, this is me and on my platform, and I should be able to say what I want to whoever I want online. And when you're the person that's receiving all those, all that hate mail, if you will, it can be hard to take sometimes.
What does this say about platforms, you guys? Jen has one. Every individual person has their own to respond. And how do they change over time? And how has social media affected how we do our job of spreading the gospel and sharing Christian living through writing?
I really appreciated some thoughts that Karen Swallow Pryor shared on the Gospel Coalition, and she talked a lot about the fact that the platform is really the work that you've done. And so many of these people that we see now as these huge names, and they have these massive platforms, so many of them have been, like she talked about, Beth Moore and Ann Voskin. They've been laboring unknown for years. We come into them now in this space where they have millions of Twitter followers and Instagram followers, and they have what we see now as these massive platforms. But for years and years, they were just doing the faithful work that they were called to do, and writing and speaking and sharing these messages. And I think it just gets so much more messy and complicated when we have such instant access to the work that they're putting out there, and we have this direct way of communicating back with them. And back in the day when authors would write a book, there was no way to directly respond. And if you disagreed with a thought, you kind of just sat with it, or maybe you talked about it with people around you, but you couldn't directly give your feedback to that author. And now we can, and I think that just opens up so much more space for these kind of responses that feel like attacks, or these kind of mean comments, or these just spaces where it feels like the mob is coming after you because there's a comment box and anyone can write in it, and there's not as much there's a little bit less of a gate between the people putting out the content and the people receiving it and interacting with it. So I think it's a challenging situation to be a content creator in this day and age.
Yeah, and I think that even the immediacy from which everything happens, you feel like someone posts something and then there's immediate response to it. And I think there's some pressure that people feel that I can't build a platform, I can't build a brand if I don't do that, and if I don't just constantly feed into the machine and make my voice heard above the rest. And I think it does tend to make us live in a means of outrage all the time, where we're just always upset or riled up about something. Versus just slowing down and before the internet, there was time to reflect and think and maybe gather other ideas around you through books or through friends, and sit at a table and talk about ideas before you write down your opinion on them just so quickly. And so I think that that's something we really have to consider too on our end as writers and editors, and I guess on the other side as consumers of this information, just being thoughtful about how we're taking it in. And we've talked about too, can I appreciate and agree with and accept parts of a person's platform and the thing that they talk about and the thing that they voice, and maybe not all of them. And I think that's becoming harder and harder too. We think that I can't support or like someone or, share the person's work if I don't agree with the entire body of it. And we feel this pressure of, what will someone think if I share this thing from Jen Hatmaker, knowing that she's in the past supported, gay marriage. And we just have lost a lot of nuance, I think, too, in our conversations. So
it happens
all
everywhere.
Things to consider, yeah.
We throw babies out with bathwater all the time. I will not regardless whoever is the president, when it was Obama, when it was Trump, I have problems with both of them. I avoid liking or commenting on things that any of them do well, lest it's not worth the feedback I'm going to get from someone who thinks I'm a complete supporter of this person and everything they ever stand for. And the same happens in the Christian space now. I have thought for years about this question of platform. Rachel, I'm glad you mentioned Karen Pryor's piece, in which she mentions people like Ann Voskamp, Beth Moore. My own example in my own life was Max Lucado. I went and studied writing in college because I wanted to be the next Max Lucado. And what I meant by that when I would tell people was I wanted to build a big enough platform that I could make a living off of being a Christian and telling other people what to do, basically.
How's that working out for you,
I had
Sean?
good motives for that. Well, I got to the job I wanted anyway. But then once I got it and I had this platform, there are people in my life who have asked me to use this platform in a certain way. I have a blog on Crosswalk that I could do this. Why don't I do it more? Because just for me personally, it hasn't been worth it to be irresponsible in this way, or to cater to any single individual audience. When I have something to say, I say it, but it's no longer a driving force of, I've got to get to a certain level with this. But I think with a lot of people, you have to, and especially in this day and age where you do have the brand to build. The brand and the platform almost become synonymous. I have a mother-in-law who obviously is older, and she has been writing in the Christian space professionally for a long time, but it's this self-promotion that makes it very difficult, and is also very difficult for a lot of Christians, and which is why people in the audience are sometimes going to envy you. And, well, why do you get to say this? You don't really have any reason. So if you say something I don't like, I'm really going to let you have it because I'm frustrated today.
Mm-hmm. People like Jen, I think, I don't know if this is specifically her path, but there are just a lot of people out there who just want to write. And from what I can recall, it sounded like, Jen became popular when she started telling stories about her family. And people could relate to it, and she obviously enjoyed telling these stories. And that, if you want to get to the point where you are actually making a living doing that, then as your popularity grows, there are all these other factors that come into play that kind of push you in that direction. They push you toward, well, what is your message? And how would you elevator speech what your blog is all about or your book is all about? And it seems like every Christian blogger out there who starts doing that, their goal is to get a book deal at some point. So, you're working with people who are involved in publishing who want to be able to market what you're doing. Therefore,
who is your audience?
They're pushing you to build your audience. And there's where there wasn't this pressure probably 20 years ago. Now there's this pressure from all of the apparatus around you that's also helping you and making money with you as you build your platform. They're pressuring you to get more specific and do things that are going to grow your audience, not break up your audience. So if you're starting out and you're just this blogger who wants to tell stories, and then 5-10 years later you are a Christian cultural icon, if you will, I can see where it can be sort of depressing to look back and say, but I just wanted to tell stories, but the river of thought and pressure pushed me to this point, and now everybody's mad at me. And
don't you think it's not just the publishers, but it's we have audiences on both sides who have agendas and issues, and they get to the point where all they really want to know about, you've risen to a certain point. Okay, what's your take on this one key pet issue of mine, whatever that may be? Once you give that, I can either dismiss you now or now you're my hero. Neither one is a healthy response. But I think this is somewhat of what Jen means when she talks about, at least in our space, the Christian machine and the publishing and the audience and the comments and the feedback and what it can do to a person after a while when you are a part of it. And what I fear it does, and let's get your guys' comments on this, is I think it takes a person like Jen and they end up wounded and they retreat and they write only a certain way for a certain audience from now on.
Yeah, I think that, you mentioned making a living off this. I don't think even the majority, especially of women, think they're going to make a living off of a book. I think they just are struggling to even get a foot in the door in the way that the current system is set up, because you can't even pitch a book and get it accepted if you don't have a certain amount of followers, if you don't have a certain look about your Instagram page.
Who are you?
Who are you?
Sure.
You've become a brand. Like, we are a brand now, and we sell ourselves as much as we sell any idea that we're writing about. And there's tremendous pressure. Like, there are certain topics that I think, I could maybe write a book about that. But then you have that pressure. Okay, if you write about anything, you need to be able to speak to any topic and let me know your take on this hot button issue, because I got to figure out if I agree with that before I could buy anything that you are trying to sell. And so there's just so much pressure, I think, especially on women, to look a certain way, to be personable, but smart, but not,
But not teach a man the
not
Bible
teach
smart.
Not scary
threatening.
smart, just engaging smart.
It's basically impossible standards, and
is.
I sometimes wonder, okay, to what degree as Christians and as Christian publishers, and do we need to hold ourselves to a different standard? But it's hard.
Trevin Wax talked about platform building being a dangerous business because it's this kind of combination of a truth and pride thing of like, there's a truth if you have this, this God-given message you feel that you're compelled to share. You hope it'll be significant to others. I feel like so many women have that. Like, I have this thing I want to share, and I know it'll help other moms or other women or other single women or whatever it is. But there's always that kind of pride mixed in that if you have this message, the current culture and the kind of climate of this atmosphere is that you have to find a way to deliver that message. And he says that those pathways wind through perils of fame and money and power, and all of that gets tied into it. And in my mind, I think so much of that kind of dilutes the message if you get so caught up in, like, I have this thing to say, but if I'm so caught up in, like, how I'm presenting it and making sure my Instagram is pretty enough to, like, get these beautiful quotes out there and all of that, I feel like it kind of can take away from, I don't know, just the goodness of that message in its core. But I don't know. What's the solution there?
I agree.
It's a challenge.
Something both of you touched on is it used to be you'd have a good idea, you'd submit that book idea, and you would hope that it would be read on its own merits.
Right.
But the question more now, as you said, Kelly, is, well, who are you, and who's your audience? Difficult subjects to build. You have to build the platform first.
Yeah, as print becomes more and more difficult to, their margins, they're trying to make money. Their margins are smaller and smaller. It's harder to find wins. The people who are finding communicators to put on their platforms are looking for people who understand how it works. It's just that the pressure that comes in to make your budgets, and we feel this stuff too. It's you have to find the things that are going to resonate with the largest audience. And even with, we're not publishing books, but even with the articles and the interviews and the things that we do, it's always extremely helpful to work with writers who understand how the system works
and our space,
and have their own audience already. And it's just it's, I don't know if it's a machine, the way that I think Jen describes it in the blog, but it can certainly feel that way if you're this person who just wants to, I just want to tell my story and and put it out there and let God do with it as He wills.
And then you still run into the interesting thing, even in with us. What does the audience know about this person, and did they agree with this person or not? And it's been always a really interesting issue with me. Someone reads an article on our site. They don't disagree with it. I wonder why they expected to have to in the first place. I mean, we've got denominations for every little thing that separate Christianity, and why you would expect to never be challenged in your faith or always read something that you agree with. It's human nature to some extent. But and you want to believe that all Christians feel exactly the same way about everything. Otherwise, you're a Christian and I'm not. Oh no, what does that do? So many factors at work here, and it's like you said, Steve. This is a changing landscape as print becomes less available, and as social media continues to grow, or maybe at some point it will wane. All these things, we have to figure out a balance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what I really liked that Karen Pryor said was a platform can never affirm us in the ways that Jesus and those who see us regularly can. I think I so often as a writer come back to the fact that regardless of what the numbers are showing me or the stats are showing me or regardless of who's commented or who hasn't or what feedback I've gotten, at the end of the day, all of that pales in comparison to the affirmation and the encouragement that my real life close community can give me or that I can find in Christ. And I think there's a lot to be said for doing the work anyway. And I think we've talked about that when it comes to a lot of our writers, that the writers I think I personally like working the most with are the ones that are going to write regardless. And if they have a message to say, they're going to say it. And they kind of have this humility of like, I have this message and I want to put it out there. And I'm going to trust, like you said, that God will do what he will with it or he won't. And I'm going to do it anyway and keep doing the work. And I don't know, there's some kind of having that grace and that humility to just say, like, if this is my thing that I'm called to, I'm going to do it. If the numbers and the success and the fame and all of that comes, to God be the glory. If it doesn't, same thing. But it really, like, I think what we're really called to do with our platforms is to serve others and to glorify God. And if the numbers get in the way of that, maybe it's time for a step back.
That's right. Don't be afraid
yeah.
of not succeeding in the numbers today.
Right.
As
just
long as you're doing what you're called to do.
Do it anyway, yeah.
So now we're going to talk about a new book out by Lisa Jo Baker. It's called Never Unfriended, The Secret to Finding and Keeping Lasting Friendships. And I think we can all agree we've all either read the whole thing or bits of it, and we've all really enjoyed it. And I think each of us, even though it is written specifically for women, have pulled out, good things, thinking things that have helped us kind of process through our own struggles and frustrations with friendship and gave us some encouragement. So what did you guys think about the book?
I really liked a lot of the things that she had to say here. I think as someone that is an introvert, but someone who deeply values community and close community that doesn't just stay on the surface level, I found a lot of this to be really encouraging. She talked a lot about kind of our craving for connection as women and how that just runs so deep in kind of the nature of who we are and that we are really truly wired to connect. And I heard that, was like, yeah, absolutely. But on the flip side of that, how many kind of frustrations and challenges and just difficulties that come into friendships. And I just think that she had a lot of really great kind of advice for that, really awesome stories, and just really, kind of convicting thoughts about sticking in friendships and not quitting them when they get uncomfortable or challenging. I really like that she said there's no done when it comes to sacrificial love, which is such a key thing in friendships, but there's always only more. And I think so often I just want to give up because something gets hard. I'm like, what would it look like to just keep pushing into more of this, this friendship and this depth? So I got a lot out of this for sure.
I did not like the title. It made me feel like it was going to go a little social media on me. And then in the introduction, when she very clearly states that she's writing for women, I was like, I wonder what this is going to have to do for me. But I've been really dealing in my own life with this topic of friendship and where are my wife and my friends and where are my friends except for the ones I've already still got since college. But Lisa invites you to skip ahead in her book to different sections. And the one I skipped ahead to on making friends, she did something that I don't know, made me feel stupid. It was obvious.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Friendship as ministry, as be, have a friend, be a friend. But she couched it in the story of the Good Samaritan, and in saying this person that passes by, you may even have nothing in common with them. You may be even vast opposites, and you need to just go out there and find the opportunities and basically make a friend with that person by finding a need that they have, basically remembering your calling to do ministry in your life. And it was like, oh, yeah, I'm going home and watching Netflix every night and thinking about my own situation. And it's given me so much to think about that way.
I think hearkening back to our last conversation about Jen Hatmaker, it sounds like the title of the book may have been something that
a branding,
an anxious marketing executive pressured her into, but because there's certainly a difference between all and online friendships and
unfriendings,
the way that social media has changed the way we all.
I unfriend you. That's not how this works.
Yeah, exactly. And different people have different definitions for what they mean when they say things like that. But I've been reading Lisa Jo's blog for a long time, and she is a fantastic storyteller. And even though the book is obviously written with a women's audience in mind, there's some great things about, being an introvert and how that affects your ability, or how you can let that affect your ability to make friends. And, as you get older, it seems like it's typically harder to make deeper friendships like you had when you were in high school and in college. Her story about like that time when you get to church and you're like, you have to join this giant room full of people who are talking to each other in the foyer or the hallway when you get in. It's like, I was reading that, and she's such a great storyteller. So it's sort of like I was feeling the anxiety of that because as an introvert, that's, having to go into and sort of find a way to connect with a room full of people, most of whom you probably don't know that well, can be an anxiety ridden experience.
Time to make the small talk. The guys are going to want to talk sports.
Exactly. And if you don't particularly like sports, like I don't love it like a lot of guys do, it can be difficult to try to find that way to connect with, a giant room full of people, and manufacture some small talk to sort of, hopefully, maybe I'll make a friend today. I don't think we ever go into those situations thinking, I'm going to make a friend today. You just sort of grit your teeth and steel your courage to its sticking place to try to get through it.
Yeah, she said in that book, maybe the most radical, intimate thing we can do for our friends is to show up. And I love just kind of how simple that is, but how rich, too, that in so many of the moments where I've looked back and been like, that was just a beautiful picture of friendship. It was really just a friend being there. And it wasn't that they necessarily had everything in common with me or knew the perfect thing to say or that we had these shared interests, but they were just there when I needed a shoulder to cry on, or they were there when I needed someone to celebrate with. And I think so often we turn friendship into this bigger thing when sometimes it kind of just, the essence of it is really just to show up and be there.
I love that quote, too, because it made me think so many social events as an introvert, Steve, like you mentioned, I think about, is this going to do anything for me? Not realizing, is it a false humility? I don't know. That my presence might do something for somebody else. And this is another way in which she's starting to turn my head around. Any other quotes you guys really liked or messages in the book?
Yeah, I think just summing up everything we've talked about, I really appreciate how she encourages us, like, the onus is on you to be the friend that you want to have. And I think that we do get into these mindsets of, we don't mean to, but we go into every situation thinking, okay, what am I going to get out of this? Is this worth my time? Am I going to meet, is there anyone there that I could possibly connect with, instead of surrendering that thinking and saying, no, like, this isn't about what I'm going to get out of it. This is a chance for me to show up and be a friend to someone, and to see someone who's on the peripheral and maybe needs, someone to just come up to them and see them and to know them in some way. And, for me, it was just an encouragement to not go into what might be my automatic frame of mind into thinking, okay, I'm just going to hunker down and try not to be seen because I'm self-conscious or I'm anxious or I'm an introvert, but to say those things don't have to define me, define how I go about making friends, define who my friends are, but rather kind of letting go of that self-consciousness and self-focus and being more self-forgetful in those moments, I think is really helpful.
Self-forgetful. That's a good word.
That's my word. I've been thinking about that a lot lately. So
the book is Never Unfriended by Lisa Jo Baker, and recommended by all four of us, men and women alike.
Yeah, and you can find her on the Encourage blog, too. She's kind of the brain behind that site that we know and love well.
So now we come to the final segment of our podcast, where this and every week we talk about the thing that's most making us happy. We call this Check This Out. Sean McAvoy, what do you think we should check out this week?
Well, I've been laid up with a few health issues in the recent weeks, so I've been catching up on my Netflix and the movies I haven't gotten to see over the last few years. And what I'm kind of interested in is movies that I have never been interested in before. Movies about business and capitalism, and is it good and does it work, and what are the bad parts? And
so the Lego Movie.
Well, yeah, of course, the Lego Movie. No, I'm talking about The Big Short and The Founder specifically, both of which I watched on back-to-back days for the first time this week. The Founder being, of course, Ray Kroc's story about basically stealing McDonald's from the McDonald brothers and turning it into the corporation that we know today. And The Big Short being about the 2008 housing market collapse and how that has affected both American and world economies in so many ways. And I found them both fascinating in ways that, again, this is not typically my genre that I go in for. But what I've really has been making my head spin is, wow, capitalism and business works really well to go this far. But then if you want to really be great at it, wow, you really have to become something that, as a Christian, I'm not comfortable with becoming. And so it's given me a lot to think about economically. Good stuff.
And we probably should say both of those movies are rated R. So
I believe that's true, Steve McGarvey.
Before
thank you for sin shaming me.
Before you,
Jesus
before you let your kids watch them.
Oh yeah, no, they're not kid movies.
Check out the cautions.
Yeah.
Kelly, what's up with you this week?
This week I have brought a book in. It is called Think Again, Relief from the Burden of Introspection by Jared Mellinger. He's a pastor at Covenant Fellowship Church in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. And I mentioned briefly self-forgetfulness in the last segment, and this really ties into that. This idea, I've been thinking about it for several years now after a friend recommended that I read Tim Keller's book on glorious self-forgetfulness. I can't remember the title exactly of that book, and there's a sermon that is basically the book in sermon form. But this ties into that, just the idea, and we've talked about this in the segment of once you become so into branding and what you look like on social media, you can become so burdened by introspection and by constantly looking at yourself, and you become so self-conscious that you can really just become in bondage of introspection. And what does it look like to break free of that? Well, it looks like turning ourselves outward and upward. So I really recommend this book if that's something that you feel like you struggle with like I do. I think it's a really good idea that needs more discussion as we continue to go through social media and the internet and what our lives look like that we project out to people. It's a good thing to keep in mind. So again, that book is called Think Again, Relief from the Burden of Introspection. It's by Jared Mellinger.
Rachel, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, so a while ago, I backed a Kickstarter and then promptly forgot about it. And when it showed up at my door this week...
As one is often done.
Yeah, I was surprised to find 4 beautiful copies of the Gospels presented as like more of a magazine form. So these come from Alabaster, and they are just one kind of magazine formatted book for each Gospel, and they are just really beautifully designed. They kind of have that mixture, like it's like a hybrid magazine book kind of thing. They're about like 100 pages, but a little bit bigger than a book, and just beautiful photography and art throughout, just presented alongside the scripture. And they talked a lot about this being kind of a project for a culture that cares about beauty and being visually engaged. And I feel like it kind of just brings a new kind of breath of fresh air alongside the words I've read so many times in the scriptures. So I'm really excited about it. I'm excited to read through kind of all 4 of them and see what art goes along with these stories that I know well. But they're very beautiful. They're from Alabaster, and I think you can still purchase them even though the Kickstarter has been funded. So we'll share the link to that in these show notes.
Do you know if there's any plans to do any more books of the Bible in that format?
I'm not sure. I know that the Kickstarter just was for the 4 Gospels, and I haven't heard if they're doing more with it.
It does look really cool. It's kind of soft cover and looks easy to read. And our last episode was about Bible study, and I think this is a really interesting way. And I regret not bringing this up last time, that sometimes reading the Bible is a challenge because, not to sound juvenile, but there's no pictures, and it's not broken up very well because it wasn't written in like paragraph or chapter form, and here we go.
Right, and there's a lot of white space in here too, so plenty of room to add notes or kind of journal alongside as you go through. So I'm impressed.
Excellent.
Yeah, Steve, what about you?
Well, check this out, is an article by Stephen Altrogi, who is a blogger and podcaster who he shared his stuff with us on some of our brands in the past, and I've always been a fan of his for for a while. I try to check out his blogs every week, and they a few days ago he republished something he did a couple of years ago called "The Problem with Purity Rings." Now, my kids are fast approaching the teenage years, so I've got my eyes out for different things like this, and so I liked his piece because he talks about, like, when, I think he's probably pretty close to my age bracket. He talks about how when we were teenagers, like, that was a thing for
all the rage.
The girls to have purity rings and as a symbol of their commitment to abstinence. And he really some of it, the article is tongue in cheek, but he really unpacks what that is and what that means and what it meant then and how it's sort of become cliched now. And he says a lot of interesting things about what is the most effective way to teach young people, like, what does purity mean from a Christian perspective. And he talks about how we have to do more than just tell somebody they can't do something. We have to tell them what they can do and what they should focus on. And it's not a long article, but I thought he made some really good points about the worldview that as parents we should approach when we talk about these things with our kids. So I thought it was pretty helpful and informative, especially for me, who's got some kids that are about to become teenagers. And you can find that on his blog, theblazingcenter.com, and we will certainly link to that from our show notes.
That brings us to the end of our show. Thank you again to Steve McGarvey, Sean McAvoy, Kelly Gibbons for being here today. And thanks again to our audio engineers, Steven Sanders and Kyle Fletcher. You can follow us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/crosswalkpodcast. And to find out more about any of the topics we talked today, to listen to past episodes, or just generally stay in touch with us, you can find us at insidetheeditorsroom.com. And you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, or SoundCloud to get the latest episodes downloaded straight to your phone. Thanks for listening.
Llama, llama.
Red pajama.
Red pajama.
Is that good?
Yes.
Hey, llama, how about something, for the effort?